And welcome back to a new episode of the New Generation Challenge podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Brett Purnell,
And I'm Titi Fernandez.
and we're back to talk about episode 4 of the Challenge Era 40, season 40 Battle of the Eras. And we are getting into one of everybody's favorite episodes this season of, well, pretty much every season, and that is trivia.
Yeah, and I've mentioned this before, but trivia challenges are my favorite challenges.
Same as mine.
Just I love seeing everybody up there because it's usually a heights over water, being scared to death, not knowing what language they speak in Australia. Just little things like that. I think it's so entertaining to see everybody just scared to death, not knowing what the answers to simple questions are. And I love seeing TJ dying laughing when
I
he
I
throws them
think
off.
I think my favorite one that sticks out to me is the USA 2 trivia challenge
Hmm.
when I'm sitting there as a resident of the city of Ottawa, Canada, going, of course, Tory Deal does not know that we're the capital of this country because
Oh,
nobody knows that Ottawa's the capital of Canada
I
except
just found that
people.
out.
Yeah, exactly. Except people that live in here.
Yeah.
It,
And I
and it,
watched that episode too. You would think it would come to
and
me,
it's
but
funny because I'm always telling like friends of mine in other countries that they're just like, oh, Toronto's not the capital, and I'm like, and New York isn't either.
yeah, that is funny, I guess, if you think about that from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we'll obviously get to this later, but it was probably one of the most controversial eliminations ever
At least
since
that
the
we've seen in a
Ninja
while.
and Laurel car or
Yeah.
Ninja and Laurel elimination. So definitely a lot to talk about in this episode. But we start off the episode with everybody getting back from the elimination.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
Um, Coming back in, it was interesting. I think everyone is kind of like we just talked about, glad to not be dealing with everything that went on with Tony for the past couple of days at this point. And the kind of all the others seem to be moving on from that drama that took place
Mm-hmm.
in deliberation, and now we're down to what, 30 players. We're all
Yeah.
it's like we're already, I mean, 30 players with one or two depending on where we are in the game going home every week is still going to give us a lot of challenge 40 left. We're just at the beginning of the game, but at the same time we've already seen one of every four players who came to Vietnam go home.
Yeah, and I do want to mention this. We briefly talked about obviously Tony not trying his hardest, but it does make me kind of sad for someone like Leroy,
Yeah.
who we know he really wanted to be there. And if Tony was just there for an appearance, whatever, he should have been done the first episode and let someone like Leroy, who actually wants to be there and actually wants to win, continue on in the game. So I think everybody is just, like you mentioned, kind of glad that that liability is gone.
Yeah.
Um, I think that Era One is gonna notice that they are gonna suffer without someone like Jody on their
Oh,
team.
absolutely.
And yeah, but then is there
You
anything else
could
that happened
you could make
before?
the case looking at Era One that when they lost Katie, she was probably one of the weakest members, but now that they
Mm-hmm.
lost Jody, it's the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And Jody, even though she's Era One, has gone pretty far recently in All Stars. So
Oh yeah,
she's certainly been
absolutely.
around the game, not just dating way back, but even into the most recent times.
Yeah, and I did listen to one of I think it was her exit interview, and she talked about how before this season she was in the best shape of her life. Like she trained so much before coming there. So I definitely think that her not being there anymore is not going to be something good for um Era One. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of the complete opposite, and I guess we just touched on this, but with Jody going, it's not great for Era 1. With Tony going, it's probably a chance for Era 3 to solidify as a group that seems to be one of the
Mm-hmm.
strongest groups in this game, but was also one of the most polarizing groups in the game, and one of them probably the era that has the most tense players that are very
Yeah.
different personalities.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I do think that the we saw Tony obviously come in better shape than he's ever came in.
Yeah.
So I do think that even though he was a wild card, he is still kind of even a meat shield for some people, or also just somebody that can help a lot in challenges that require a lot of physical strength. So I definitely think that you could see it both ways because he's also one of the most uncoordinated people that we've ever seen on the show. So definitely interesting for both Era 1 and Era 3. But then do we go straight into the daily after
Yeah, we
this?
go straight to trivia.
So I was super excited when TJ came out and said that the challenge was going to be trivia because like we just talked about, it's one of our favorite um or it's our favorite challenge, but I did kind of like that it was Jeopardy
Yeah,
based. We saw like giving the point values to different questions that were harder or easier, but I will say I did not like how it was like if they got it wrong, two people
yeah.
dropped. Like I
You
don't know,
could
I
have
feel like
easily just said the person who answers drops. And even if it's like many other trivia challenges where they don't air all the questions, so be it.
yeah,
We could
I
have
don't know.
just seen them cut to like a few people flying off of the
Yeah,
platform if they don't have enough time for it. But having two people drop made it almost go too quickly, where you started to notice that players be a little too nervous of trying to answer harder questions.
and I'm pretty sure that they were able to strategically place people where they wanted to place them.
Yeah,
Because we saw Kyland in the middle, and then at the end it was Laurel and Jordan. Like just, I don't know, I feel like they were able to kind of just have some people there as um just if we get a question wrong, whatever, we'll drop them instead of dropping us. So I don't know. But um I do because I was thinking of like what a better way to do trivia with like the teams like that, like large teams. I liked how the USA 2
yeah,
version was because like I guess the punishment for getting something wrong was on the whole team because their platform got pushed up farther, but it also made it so um they could work together as a team and also not all like it's not like a random thing of who falls or whatever.
exactly.
But yeah, do you have any more thoughts on trivia?
Yeah, we mentioned that about the falling. I found this a bit interesting, is not to get too far ahead, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure everybody listening has probably watched the episode. Era
Mm-hmm.
1 wins, and I mean, no surprise there, seeing that a lot of the well, all of the questions, but especially a lot of the harder questions were like really in-depth details about random seasons.
Or I'm pretty sure it was Laurel and Bananas who won, right?
Laurel
Or Laurel.
Laurel wins the tiebreaker against
Yeah.
Jordan,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but Era 1, doesn't Era 1 win outright and Era 4 goes out first, or am I getting it wrong?
I'm pretty sure I think Era 4 goes up first
Era 4
and then
certainly goes out
it was
first.
Era 1 and
Okay,
then the tie of Era 3 and 2.
3 and 2. Okay,
Yeah.
so that makes more sense. Sorry about that. It's been a while.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think back on it too. But yeah,
But you didn't get any questions the way you normally do in a lot of seasons, like I was just mentioning of what's the capital of Canada, or what language do they speak in Australia, or what's Taylor Swift's tour called.
yep. I
Everything was related to past seasons of the challenge, which at least in my mind, I instantly watched it and went, "Oh, for is fucked," because they just came onto the show so recently.
Yeah, and if you would have asked me, I would have bet on Era 1 to win this challenge just because they have been on like the earliest seasons, and
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of them have, if they're coming back, they've probably continued to watch some
Oh,
seasons
for
or
sure.
have been, even if they don't watch all of them. But I think it was kind of funny when Kylan said geography 400 because I think he was probably, I don't know if he was confused on if it was just going to be a geography question or something, because I feel like you don't start right off the bat with a 400 question.
You don't normally, but I did like that strategy from him because we did see, like you mentioned, that it was based off Jeopardy. And one thing we've seen for those in the Jeopardy audience is that that is exactly what James Holzhauer did recently to become the most successful Jeopardy player of pretty much all time.
It's just start up with the
Is he basically so James on Jeopardy is a professional gambler from Las Vegas, and
mm-hmm,
he basically reversed the whole strategy of the game and started bashing out right answers to hard questions so
mm,
that way he would be so far ahead that nobody could catch up with him with it by the time they get to the first commercial break.
okay, I guess that makes sense. I didn't think about it. I didn't know that. So,
But
yeah.
yeah, I think that's where Kylan picked it up from. But I also think he was not expecting to get some random geography question from Era 1. I think he was expecting to get a general knowledge question that he probably would have learned in geography class growing up, and it backfired on him badly, and that set the tone for Era 4 all
Yeah.
the way through this challenge. Well,
And I think I did
as long as they lasted.
I think that I remember last week on Twitter, Kylan was talking about how he has a really good memory and he had memorized, he said from almost every round of this is later on, but the elimination, he can remember exactly how many pegs were left for each person.
Oh wow.
Something like that. I guess he has a really good memory, so maybe he just started looking up where each location or where each season was located and maybe that's what he was remembering, but I don't know. But I was not surprised that Era 4 lost just because they got into the game later on. The challenge just came into their life in the last what,
Few years.
7 years at most.
When you look at who's there, it's like Jenny was started in 35, Michele in 37,
Theo was World of Worlds
so
1.
34.
Yeah. And
So
then
yeah, roughly around that point.
yeah, so I guess it made sense
Olivia was
that
38.
it
Polly
made
was like
sense.
32.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I guess Polly was final
Well,
rec.
Polly's gone, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh.
I'm just trying to think of who's on that team to begin with. Polly's
Yeah.
probably the most experienced.
Yeah, I think Paulie would have done really good on this challenge because I think he's one of those that has like when he was on his probation or timeout from the challenge, I think he went back and watched a lot of the seasons, so
Yeah,
he would be more um versed in that type of um like a trivia challenge.
yeah, I would agree.
But anyways, we see that Era 4 loses, and then we have Era 1 go next, which again was surprising. But we have Era 2 and Era 3 tie, which it turned into them getting off of the platform and doing a tiebreaker.
Yeah,
What did you think about that?
that was really interesting. Especially just seeing the fact that they could pick who they wanted to do the tiebreaker and watching
Mm-hmm.
Laurel and Jordan as two of the biggest names in this show go head to head
Mm-hmm.
in one trivia question.
Yeah. And I think this was another controversy on Twitter and social media, but we see Jordan say he didn't remember
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne's name and he went to Corey's baby shower. He is he is saying that he did not throw it or whatever, but you can hear him when he was trying to get it out. He said like shh and then he changed it to Sylvia.
Yeah,
So you could tell he was on the right track,
you
you
could.
know? And I do think that Jordan threw it because I
Yeah.
think that he knew that no matter what, Laurel was not going to throw him in.
And
And
I mean, Sylvia is a big enough name in this show that you probably wouldn't. mistake
Exactly.
her for somebody
Exactly.
else
And
with that sort of a question.
I think that Jordan was playing smarter, not harder, in the sense that he knew he was going to be safe. So instead of getting blood on his hands by no, like nominating two people in, he decided, you know what, I'm just going to throw it.
Yeah,
And because he was, or not throw it, I guess not try to win, and because he was one of the team captains. So he knows he's not going into elimination, but if he does win, he knows that he's gonna have to vote some people in. So he knows that some people are gonna have maybe some targets out for him. But did you have any more thoughts on trivia? I know a big part of the episode is the controversial
yeah,
eliminations.
when we'll get to that. But no, I agree with what you were just saying there, and I think it's interesting kind of to follow up on it in how Jordan, like you say, playing smarter, not harder, didn't want to get blood on his hands. Laurel is no stranger to being in that exact opposite position and just playing as hard as she can and
hmm
running through everybody else in the way and not caring whatsoever.
Yeah, and just kind of playing a more intimidation type of game
Yeah,
where I feel like Laurel has such a good elimination record that she a lot of times people just don't want to vote her in because they know she's probably going to come back.
yeah,
And it's like you can take a shot, but if you miss, she's going to come back and she's not going to be happy.
no,
So, I don't know. I understood that. And again, with Laurel's intimidation factor, I feel like if she votes you into elimination and you come back, you might not want to pick a fight with her.
that's true. And I guess last thing about trivia that we didn't mention, but CT
Oh
gets
yeah.
sent to the
I
hospital at this point in time.
yeah. Um and then I saw that the cast members asked production to lower the platform
Oh,
after that
really?
happened because they all just said we're not, and I think Jordan was a big part of this, so we're not getting back on there until you lower it because they saw what happened to CT. But I think it just goes back to some of these Air One people are getting older and their
Yeah.
bodies are not going to be in the same that they were in their 20s and their 30s. And I was scared when I saw that.
Oh,
It's like
absolutely.
when you're falling from that high and you see somebody getting taken away in an ambulance, it's not something that I want to go back up there and
No, for sure.
see when TJ's gonna drop me. But then I'm glad you mentioned that because we did see like Emily Schramm do one of the most athletic things I've ever seen.
Yeah,
Like wrapping her legs on there when it dropped her and then holding on so she dropped nicely.
exactly.
But yeah, so I don't know. What did you think of CT falling and hurting himself?
It was scary to watch it. I think, like you mentioned, that I don't know why, and it brought me kind of back to watching both Michele and Olivia falling last season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why they need to do I like these heights over water challenges, but I mean, as someone who's done a bit of diving in the pool, there's no difference on television if it's 5 meters or 10 meters or whatever that
Mm-hmm.
translates to in feet for most of the audience. Um, 30 or, oh, no. Yeah,
I
30
think
or
like
15
2 feet
or
is like 6 feet. So
something like that. It's gonna play in my mind. But that doesn't really make a difference for TV, so I don't know why it's not a little lower just for cast member safety. Also, for a season that's Battle of the Eras and that's 40 and that's such a big season, the fact that we almost, I mean, he came back and that's great, but the fact
hmm
that we could have lost CT of all players medically as opposed to being in elimination would have put a big damper on the entire season.
Oh, absolutely. And I would totally agree with you on that. I like the heights over water challenges, and I think I like them because they're fun, but I think that if they're dropping from like a height that the most it's gonna do is maybe knock the wind out of you or just oh you got a belly flap, back
Yeah,
flap. Like I think that's the height that they should do them in. I don't think that they should
exactly.
be doing it into something where bones can be broken. People might have to get stitches. Like I don't think that that's worth like one. losing a player, and also two is like having them get injured because like we've seen a lot of times when they fall, it's not a good fall. It's
No.
they're not falling correctly because again, you don't know when you're going to be dropped half the time and you're not in a position where you can try to pencil dive or tuck and roll or do whatever. So I agree with you about the safety on that, and I also agree that we can keep the heights over water challenges, but let's not make it to where it's actually going to hurt anybody.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
I want to see the producers get dropped on there, and let's have TJ get dropped, and then he can decide which height, which honestly maybe TJ is not the best option because he is such a legend
He's
and he's been through the ringer from his BMX and
yeah, it
everything.
literally.
So maybe we can have somebody else go up there and make sure that they're getting dropped from an adequate height.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. All right, so then we go back, leaving trivia. The cast goes back to the house, and kind of like we just talked about at the end, that we see a conversation between Corey Wharton and Devin questioning whether Jordan actually wanted to win the challenge.
Yeah, I definitely think that was warranted from Corey's side. And again, Jordan is denying, and he's to this day denying that he didn't throw it or whatever. But it's also like when you're working as a team, you obviously have to try your best, but you also want to make sure that it never looks like you're trying to sabotage your own team, if that
Yeah,
makes any sense.
completely.
And like I think this is different because again, if for some reason era 3 would have been an elimination, Jordan would have been an elimination. So it's not that big of a deal, but if it would have been if Jordan wasn't on the block to be nominated, I think that that would have been a very big issue. And that's something that we see on next week's preview with Laurel saying, I don't want Emily on my team. Like that's competition that I don't need, you know?
Yeah.
So with the teams, I think it can get tricky, and especially with when your own team is accusing you of possibly throwing a challenge.
For sure. So now at this point, we know that both Jenny and Horacio are going to be into elimination, and we start to see the two of them kind of decide where they want to go. We see Horacio talking to Laurel about that he would rather go against Derrick for Miller One as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to against Jordan, and then that he'd like to compete in the final with Jordan.
Yeah.
This is at least interesting because Laurel's had a history with both Horacio and with Jordan at different times.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
she's certainly has many different relationships in there.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that. I think that, like you said, Jordan is the type that he wants to compete against the best, and that's also the attitude that we see from someone like Kara. But I think most people are not in that mindset, and they're seeing we have someone like Horacio who is definitely capable of becoming a champion one day, but then also someone like Jenny who is a champion. So
Yeah.
I feel like those targets were definitely like you have to be sure, or you have to make sure that you're sending in the right people if these are some people that you're trying to take out. I feel like the person that you want to send in is the person that you don't want to see come back, because when they come back after you send them in, they're probably going to be gunning for you, you know?
And that makes, I guess, a lot of sense as to why, even though Jordan's probably the biggest threat on the men's side of this game,
Mm-hmm.
that if you're Horacio, you might not want that head to head between one of the multi-time champs against somebody that people see as the strongest player to come in recent seasons on the men's side,
Yeah.
because then you're setting that up right away where you might lose. Whereas if they go further in the game, I would see many scenarios where both Horacio and Jordan have a lot of respect for each other and end up working together once they're kind of out of just focusing on keeping your era strong.
Yeah, and I think that they're both, like you said, they're both the type of players that are more concerned. They want to boost their own ego. They
Yeah.
want to know that if
And
they
I mean,
want,
that's to be expected from essentially two people that have tried at different points of their life to become a professional athlete.
yeah.
Horacio
And
in soccer and Jordan in auto racing.
yeah. Wait, what did Jordan try to do?
He's trying to get into NASCAR.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I forgot about that. Um, I think that they're both a type that want to say they won and they won against the best of the best. So, but also if I was somebody else, like if I was a Bananas or anybody else there, I'd be like, if I can get one of these two guys out,
Yeah.
because, and I think that that's also a very good mindset to have because if you
Especially
only,
if you're a Bananas OCT going, we're both the two greatest of all times, and these two
hmm
younger guys want to take our spot.
yeah, and they both want to have the most, like, I think Zach has always said this. He's like, if I'm running a final, I want to go against all the fat people, like and I feel like I would be the same way. Like if I'm running a final, I want to go against the people that can't run, the people that can't do puzzles, and it just shows the different mentalities of these competitors, and I think it also shows the mentalities of people that are in era 3 or 4 because we see like people that the Vacation Alliance, even though we have someone like Casey who's in part of that, people are still like Tori is still keeping her around, even though Casey has beat her in a final? And then we have the mentalities of some earlier eras that are trying to get those big shots out and trying to get those big players out of the game.
Yeah. So before we get into the controversial elimination and the less controversial elimination, any thoughts on the deliberation process?
Um, I think that it was interesting because you could tell Bananas wanted to send in Jordan, but I think, no, I think Bananas was using the excuse of, I would send in Jordan if I could, but at the end of the day, he knows that Laurel's never going to do that. And
Yeah.
also, I think Jordan and Bananas kind of had this mutual understanding of, I won't come after you if you don't come after me, because then that's going to end up in both of us or one of us or both of us going home early. And I think that that's another thing that Bananas realized after his rivalry with Wes. It's like, if we both keep taking shots at each other, bigger people are going to be the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so ready to get into eliminations?
I guess the first
I
one,
guess let's start with Anissa against Jenny.
yes.
Build it up a bit.
See, I am the biggest shit talker of Anissa. I'm not even gonna lie. I I have always said that we can see that she has no endurance, she has no cardio, she whatever, but I really ate my words up when I saw her in this
Yeah,
elimination. And I think I saw a recent picture of her before and after training for 40
yeah.
or whatever, because the Anissa that sprains her ankle every season and can't run and does, she is gone and she's resting in peace, because the Anissa that I saw going against Jenny is a completely different Anissa. And I think that's what a lot of us fans have been saying about her is like she was coming back season after season, but not getting in better shape, if that makes any
Right.
sense. Like saying she wants to win, blah, 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 but then not making any changes. And I think that it was honestly kind of upsetting to see her go this soon because of how much of a fight she put up and
Yeah.
how she was just hanging in there and trying. But when
With
you
how
look
much
at,
she's put in, I don't know necessarily about what the future for players from Era 1 and Era 2 is on the main show, but like Anissa seems to be at a point in her life where maybe she could make a serious run on like All Stars 5 or 6.
yeah, absolutely. I think if she keeps that up, she can, because we know she has that strength, and
Yeah.
what she has been missing is more of that endurance and cardio. And if she's working on that, like we saw maybe Jenny was picking up more pegs at a time because she was sprinting, but we saw Anissa just the whole time was hustling and hustling and hustling. Like we saw Jenny sitting there hyperventilating, looking like she was gonna die.
Yeah. I did hear apparently Jenny had an asthma attack in the middle
Yeah.
of the competition, which I found a little odd that Jenny said at one point after an interview that production did not give her inhaler in the middle of the elimination, which we do see them do when Kiki Morris has an asthma attack on World Championships.
Yeah, and I think that's
So
interesting
I'm not sure,
because
as an asthmatic myself, where this
uh
double standard is coming from, because I know if I was to have an asthma attack in the middle of that challenge, it's over. Just walk away.
see, I think this brings up something interesting because you can make the argument of if she has to get some of her puffs of her inhaler,
Yeah.
then she would have to stop during the challenge and take time to do that. So I guess you could make the argument of we're not going to give it to you because you would have to stop in the middle of the
I mean, you
challenge
could
to
make that
do
argument,
it.
but theoretically, it's such a quick process that Anissa could just keep going.
Yeah.
And it could be time that Jenny's losing that she has to make up 20 seconds. But
But then I feel like that brings up the argument of that's unfair to Jenny. But then it also brings up the argument of that since she didn't get to have it, you know?
yeah, it's hard to say.
Here, sorry, give me one. You can keep talking. I need to put my dog on the
Oh,
couch.
no problem. But yeah, it's hard to say how that would have impacted it. More so, the only thing I was thinking of is how its different seasons seem to interpret the rules differently. And boy, are we about to come to that with Horacio against Derrick.
Yeah. And but I do want to say just ending the female conversation is I think Anissa did a good job, a very
Oh,
good
yeah,
job. We see
absolutely.
her growth and you can see that everybody on stage wanted Anissa to win just because this is not a challenge that you would ever say Anissa is good at. I think this
No,
would be the opposite. And I do think that they did Jenny dirty by not letting her have her inhaler. And I think, like obviously that was unfair, but I think that also doesn't take away from the fact that Anissa was putting in a lot of work. And I really hope that we see her again in the future, maybe on more an All-Stars type season, where seeing how her all the work that she's been putting in the off season um helps her in the future.
yeah. And All Stars finals don't seem to have the same level of endurance that are needed for a main flagship show final.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. But do you want to get us started into the men's
Yeah,
elimination?
but I do, just before we go to that, because you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned this type of challenge. I don't know about you, but this just gave me flashbacks watching this challenge to, I want to say, Final Seven immunity in Survivor 40.
Survivor. Oh yeah.
I was just, as a huge Michele fan, watching that going, thank God Michele is not in this elimination
Mm-hmm.
because she's done this challenge before.
Mm-hmm. This also, you know what it reminded me of though? It reminded me of the pacer test. I don't know if you ever had to do that when you were
Yep.
in because
Did we ever?
it's yeah, it literally brought me back to
Now that
middle
you
school
now that
days.
you say that, I have had about half a dozen asthma attacks doing that test, so I know where Jenny's coming from.
Yeah, see, we would have to do it during like gym class, obviously, and it was always like people would people would judge you on what you would get. So I would be the try hard that I am, and I would be getting I would be doing pretty good on those. But yeah, it just reminded me of that. But yeah, it is interesting that you mentioned that. I didn't even think about that when I was watching it.
All right, so moving on to the men's competition, and we once again see the same challenge. This time, we're not mixing up the eliminations the way we did in the first big set of eliminations
Mm-hmm.
between Horacio from Era 4, and he ends up getting Derek instead of Jordan. Derek Kaczynski from Era 1. And this is where pretty much all controversy has broken loose on the internet, and I think it's still going on to this very second, other than the fact that we're doing this in the middle of a presidential debate. That's about the first time I've stopped seeing this. um,
Yeah.
but what did you think of that whole challenge and how it ended up playing itself out?
So I will honestly say that I have changed my mind on what I think of this challenge about 5 different times because it honestly just depends on whose tweet I am reading or whose
Literally.
podcast clip did I just listen to. From what I've gathered, because I have looked into it and I have been watching, I have been researching. So we can obviously see, I think everybody who's listening to this has seen that. I'm trying to see if I can pull it up, but that shot of Derek's board, what's missing a peg,
Yeah.
and we see that the peg is actually it's fallen off. And we see that when, like, another thing I noticed is TJ blew the horn right as Horacio placed his peg.
Yeah.
So what does that tell me? That tells me that TJ initially what he saw was Horacio, like Derrick is missing one peg. He's sitting there like, where is it at? I can't find it. So then
Which is on his board, but
on
not
his
in the
board,
hole.
correct. And then I have also heard that the red board, the one that Derek and Anissa had, was kind of faulty. It was knocking over the pegs a lot more than the other board was. So I think they said that they were helping out Derek and Anissa pick up the pegs and put them back on the board. And then we have Horacio on the other side saying, no, they told me that I had to pick up my own pegs. And then we have, so it, from what I've gathered, it's more of eras 1 and 2 are defending Derek, and then 3 or 4 are defending
It
Horacio.
seems that that's the overall situation, which kind of not related to this elimination necessarily, but just made me even wonder how this season would be different if instead of Battle of the Eras, it was just like old school against new school, and all
Yep.
the Era 3 and Era 4 was one big team going
Mm-hmm.
against Era 1 and Era 2. Because it seems that, at least from what I see so far and why I bring this up and it ties in, I almost get the sense that as the format starts to change and we get to a mini final and a mid-season twist, that could be the way that this goes because we know there's a relationship now between Michele and Devin. We know that
Mm-hmm.
there's relationships between Ella and Tori.
Mm-hmm.
We know that play Jordan's had a relation alliances with people in Ella. We see the same thing with like how many people have been worked with bananas at one point from Ella One or with Loyal or with Kara.
I saw somebody was like asking, I think this was on Zach's podcast, but they're like somebody asked, is Bananas on the Vacation Alliance? And Zach said that Bananas is the CEO of the Vacation Alliance.
Yeah, exactly.
And um and not to get like too sidetrack on this, but I definitely think that all of these alliances, it the people are going to try to side with their alliance. You know, just how we see Scott out there defending Derek,
Yep.
we're seeing Horacio defending, or Jordan
Nerys.
defending Horacio, and Nerys defending Horacio. That's her boyfriend. And
Devin
I
was
will
probably
say,
the first person to come out to defend Horacio.
yep, I did see that on his story. But I will say one thing that because obviously I understand Nerys, her viewpoint of wanting to defend her boyfriend, but it was also like she was calling production liars and saying this and that, but it was just like you weren't there, you know?
Yeah,
And I get it. He told you what happened or whatever, but it's also like you don't have any credibility because you've seen the same things that we have seen, like basically, and you've heard the very biased side of Horacio's point of view, just how we're hearing the biased side of Derek's point of view. But
yeah.
you weren't there, and Horacio didn't have a bird's eye view of what Derek was doing. So at the same time, I don't think that she has much credibility there. But I will say, I think that this was just an elimination that was handled poorly.
It was.
I think that the faulty board made it poorly. Apparently, Horacio's ball got stuck for about 5 to 10 seconds, which doesn't seem like a lot, could be a lot, but at the same
In
time,
that close of an elimination.
we saw Horacio still needed one peg when Derek was already looking at his board. So I don't know. My thought point is that Derek won.
Yeah.
And I think we also have to remember that like TJ like TJ claimed Derrick is the winner, so Derrick is the winner, and that's the end of the story. Like TJ and his crew had to look through the tapes for an hour, and after that hour, seeing it from every single angle and with the referees and all the rules, they made the choice that Derrick won, and that just means that Derrick won. And I think that it's just kind of beating a dead horse to just continuing on the same thing, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Um, like we see with, like you bring up Loyal and Ninja. At the end of the day, production's going to make a decision, and that's pretty much the way it goes. I wasn't there, so I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if I can say who was properly who won or who was told what. I think that a lot of this probably comes down to different members of production probably explaining the challenge differently to different people when they were getting ready before they start the elimination. But who really knows what went on at that point, other than the fact that if Derrick, if they say that Derrick won, then Derrick won. It's unfortunate if so far it takes Horacio out of the challenge
Mm-hmm.
universe as a whole. Hopefully he reconsiders that now that I mean, they filmed this in the spring, and with the fact that All Stars 5 is next, possibly I hear rumors about USA 3.
Mm-hmm.
41 might not be for a while. Maybe that gives Horacio some time to cool off and after he's watched it and hopefully go to the reunion and reconnect with his cast and reconnect with production and get a chance to um reconsider that, especially seeing that last year when he was doing Excelsior, he didn't go to the reunion for
Mm-hmm.
39 when he went deep into that game and didn't have that experience the way most of the cast did. So who knows? I mean, we've seen Leroy say he isn't going to come back and come back twice now. So we Horacio still has a lot of the challenge ahead of him if he wants it, if he's decided that that was a moment of his life that was important and that he's going to move on into other things. I mean, all respect to him. Of course, he has every right to do that, just like everybody does.
Yeah, and I think that, like you mentioned, how different roles explain to different people. I don't think that that was necessarily on purpose.
Yeah,
I
not
think
at all.
I think that was more of, okay, you have to put the pegs in the board, and I don't know, maybe the Aerofor or the red board just wasn't as wasn't functioning as it was when they tested it.
Yeah,
Maybe it got rained on. I don't know.
exactly.
And then when you're in the middle of the elimination, they can't just say, "Hey, stop. The equipment is faulty."
Yeah,
So, because,
because
and
you've
that's,
already halfway done the challenge. It's not like they could have, if they figured out it was broken after, say, the first elimination, maybe swapped out in a new board for the second one.
yeah, and maybe the first few pegs that fell were picked up, and then once production realized, oh my God, everything is falling off, they're not going to make Derek sit there and pick up because then that wouldn't be
That
fair,
wouldn't
you
be
know?
fair either. That's
So
essentially sending him home at that point.
exactly. So I think that production and I think TJ made the best choice. And what happened is at some point, Derek got all of his pegs on the board. If one of them fell off after it was put on, that sucks. But and I don't know, I think that this is different from the Laurel and Ninja elimination because during the Laurel and Ninja elimination, TJ blew the horn and said, "Done. Laurel
Yeah,
wins." Ninja was being kind of sneaky and she kept going. And I
yeah,
think that's what was the difference of that.
yeah. I agree. Though at
But
least in there too, we did have a clear example of Loyal not completing the challenge correctly, even if TJ missed it at the time. That's
mhm,
why they have production to referee the challenge and to record everything on video.
mhm. Yeah, exactly. And like you mentioned with Horacio, not being on any future seasons possibly, So when I read that article, it did make me sad because he was just talking so low of himself, saying
Yeah,
that he's a failure and I failed and blah blah. But it's also like, okay, it is a game, and I understand some people take to lose. Like, I'm a very competitive person, but also if I didn't do something, I'm not going to call myself a failure for something
yeah,
that ultimately it is what it is. Like with winning comes losing. Before you can win, you need to learn how to lose most of the time.
exactly.
And I think that if, because I really disagreed with Nerese's tweets and her whole like, and I love Nerese, but I just didn't, because I agree that she wanted to defend her boyfriend, but it was also like I think she was coming in way too hard for somebody that watched the episode and wasn't there. So I think that at the end of the day, it does speak a lot. It does say a lot that she is still willing to go back on the show and he's not. And I also think it's not just this situation. I think Horacio kind of like he's realized that the challenge maybe isn't what he thinks or he thought it was going to be for him. He kind of realizes that he has to be interesting and he has to
Yeah.
give confessionals and everything. I think
And
he's
I think
more
that might be more of where he's coming from too,
mm-hmm,
is that maybe he came on there as an aspiring professional footballer
mm-hmm,
and thought that the whole thing was just seeing who could run the furthest, and it's
mm-hmm,
not. And I don't, it's like, it's disappointing because, like we both said, Horacio could become a champion. At the same time, I don't know if it's necessarily the best fit for him or the best
mm-hmm,
show for his personality, because if he doesn't become that champion soon, casting would probably just eventually pick somebody else who's
mm-hmm.
giving them more on the production angle, even if they're giving less in the competition angle.
Yeah, and I think his relationship with Nerese also kind of improved his chances
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we know Nerese is
She's the
someone.
complete opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
Noose is
So
just like her or not, and I'll admit I wasn't the biggest fan going into this season.
agreed,
Now that
yes.
I see, and she did a ask me anything on Instagram today, and
Mm-hmm.
now that I see that Noose is completely over the incident with Olivia, I like
Mm-hmm.
her a lot more, because I always felt that that was just the right gameplay to make from Olivia's perspective as
Mm-hmm.
wanting to become a champion at that point. But um, Luis is born for reality television,
Yeah.
whereas Horacio is born for athletics.
Yeah. I think Horacio would be somebody who you would see on like American Ninja Warrior.
Yeah, exactly.
Somewhere where he's not having to, because at the end of the day, the challenge is a competition show, but it's also a reality show at heart.
Yeah,
And that's why we see a lot more than just the competition. And I think that he he does like I agree that I would like to see him back and I think he can definitely be a champion one day, but at the same time, I like you said, if he doesn't get that championship or maybe like unless he's not if he continues to not give production a lot to work with, I don't think that he's not going to be getting that spot in opposed to
yeah,
people like Devin, Bananas,
exactly.
Jordan, who they understand that you have to have like a showman type of persona to be on the show and be successful.
Yep.
But do you have any more thoughts of the elimination and anything that we talked about?
Not really the elimination, but we do see who's selected by Derek and Jenny as next week's targets and team captains. So bringing up the list next week, going into the next episode,
Mm-hmm.
CT and Tina for era one,
Mm-hmm.
Nehemiah and Emily for era two. We have a ride or die pair in Devin and Tori for era three.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally Kyland and Olivia for era four.
Yeah. So let's talk about Era One first. So Tina and CT, I think selecting CT is taking a big shot, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I feel like CT we know his formula for the challenges. He comes in with a cigarette in his mouth, out of shape, and then he just turns into a monster
Yeah.
by the time the final comes around. So I think that selecting him as a target right now is, or no, he stepped up.
Yeah.
He stepped up. But anyways, I think right now is the
I think
time.
until everybody's done it once, you're going to see that. We're like, now we have these names. And then if you're looking at the rest of the list, you'll be like, okay, who's everybody who hasn't been a target will probably be a target 2 episodes from now. And then that's when it'll start getting interesting.
But see, not necessarily because we saw Josh early in the episode say, I'm going to nominate myself. I am in the best shape of my life. I'm going to step up for my team. But then we see him once CT nominates himself, he just kind of crawls back into his era and he's not nominating himself anymore. But I think at the same time, if there is a time that you want to send CT into elimination, it's when it's in the earlier part of the season.
Yeah.
So I think I do think I don't, if I was CT, I don't think I would have wanted to volunteer myself. But at the same time, you have Brad, who hasn't been in, I guess.
Yeah.
You have Darrell and Derrick, who just went in.
Yeah.
So I think it was
It makes sense.
between, yeah, I guess
And it'll be
it makes
interesting
sense.
too, just looking at this group because I don't know what we're gonna get from Nehemiah because
Mm-hmm.
we haven't seen a lot of him. But
Mm-hmm.
like the possibility of a CT versus Devin or CT versus Kyland challenge
Absolutely.
is gonna be really is CT's legacy gonna stand or is one of these top tier younger players gonna come in
Mm-hmm.
and take over?
Yeah, I would really like to see Devin and CT in an elimination that has to do with puzzles or brain things like that because we know Devin is a puzzle king and we
Yeah,
know that CT is also a puzzle king. So I really would love to see both of them in a puzzle type of elimination
that
go
would be
head to
great to see.
head. But if you were would you have picked if let's say nobody nominated themselves from era 1, would you have picked Tina and CT?
Yeah, I would have. Um, at that point, we just had Anissa. We just had Jody, who's gone home now. Katie's
Mhm.
gone home. I mean, yeah, I think I would have picked those two at that point.
Mhm.
CT is, like you say, gains strength over time, so it's probably best to give him a challenge now if they
Mhm.
don't win from another era. Whereas and Tino, we've seen not do this alongside Rachel, so it could have been
Mhm.
either of them. I think you'll probably see that with if it's Tina this time, it'll be Rachel next time, same as like in era four. If it's Olivia now, it'll be Michele next time.
Mhm.
Um, and move that across the whole board.
Yeah.
Except for try based on what we've seen in All Stars 4, I'm not 100% counting that it's going to be loyal at any point unless they
Mhm.
vote her in.
Yeah, because again, the person like I wouldn't want to select I if I was down there and I just want an elimination, I don't want to select Laurel because
No,
she's probably going to come back. Like
that's
the
it.
only times we've seen Laurel lose to elimination was the counting one with a Raven, which the whole audience helped Raven, understandably so. Her
Which they
loss.
did, but just to quickly touch on that too, that's the one time that I wouldn't mind to see loyal in an elimination is if you're, especially if you're a player that has those skills when it comes to any sort of puzzle challenge like
Mm-hmm.
Nulis or Michele or Tori, where Loyal is good at pretty much everything she does, but in that sort of challenge, Loyal gets very frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
can be her downfall at some point in time. And that's what I'll be watching for her in this season.
Mm-hmm.
If she goes on to not win the season, is it because someone beats her or is it because Loyal just finds a challenge that she starts getting annoyed and therefore not focusing on actually accomplishing whatever the goal is at that time?
Yeah. But and then so I feel like you said, like that would be the one challenge where would be something that's Laurel's weakness,
Yeah.
her getting frustrated and not being able to focus. But then we saw the ninja one, which we already talked about today, and then we saw Camilla beat Laurel
Yeah.
in Not So Fast, which again, that was the first time Laurel ever lost an elimination. So I feel like you could
And
argue
that's a
that,
challenge that Camilla has a advantage into, just being smaller and more nimble than Laurel is.
yeah. Yeah, I guess, but we, because I remember watching that season, I was really impressed with her skill to be able to, because Laurel, like we said, she has it all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. But not to get too sidetracked, again, I wouldn't want to vote Laurel into an elimination because 9 times out of 10, she is coming back.
Exactly.
Um, and then because it was who were the era two
Ella
target?
2, Nehemiah, and Emily.
Emily, yep. So we know Emily's undefeated in eliminations, so I feel
Yeah.
like that's somebody who I wouldn't want to send in. But we do see in the preview, which I mean, we don't know anything yet, but it sounds like Laurel is not trying her hardest on the daily challenge
Yeah.
to try to get Emily sent in, which
Which is
I don't know.
interesting because you would think that she would do that when Kara is the target. But
Yeah. Yeah, but I think because Laurel and Emily have not gone head to head, you know?
yeah,
Emily's never lost an elimination. So we don't know what like we mentioned, Laurel's elimination weakness would be something where she can get in her head and not be able to focus. We don't, as far as we know, Laurel or Emily doesn't have an elimination weakness.
exactly.
So, and like we said, like Laurel has beat Kara before, so I don't think that I think Emily is somebody who can threaten her status
True.
as the elimination queen or the go or whatever. So that I think that's going to be definitely interesting to see, and also the argument between Kara and Laurel, and then also Michele is going to be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
then Era 3, we have Devin and Tori doing it together.
yeah, because we see Devin got selected and then Tori stepped up, which I think that's a real ride or die.
Yeah.
And I really respect Tori for doing that and making sure that if her ride or die is going in, she's also going in.
Yeah. Completely agree. And then Era 4, we have Kylan doing it again with Olivia this time.
Yeah, like we talked about Josh, come on.
Yeah.
But it's also like, why, if I were Josh, because Josh is one of those, again, uncoordinated, like, because Josh, from what we've seen, he doesn't struggle with endurance. He doesn't struggle with swimming. He doesn't struggle with cardio. Josh is just not coordinated
Yeah.
at all. He is very clumsy. So that's why he has a 1-in-6 elimination record or something like that.
Yeah.
So if I were Josh, what I would do is don't go into elimination. You're not good at them. Like you've learned before. This is why you haven't made a final. So I don't know why he even said that in the first place, but I don't know. I thought it was kind of weak of him to go back on that
Yeah, I
at the
agree.
end. But yeah, do you have any more thoughts about this
No, I
episode?
think we're done that, and then now we'll be, for the audience, releasing after this episode comes. Well, this episode will come out on Sunday, but it'll be a week late. But
Mhm.
now we'll be releasing every Sunday after the episode airs, so we'll be pretty much in tune with the rest of the community.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to again be back on track after we both have opposite schedules. So I'm excited to be able to talk about the episodes right as they come out, as my thoughts are like really fresh in my mind, and just being caught up with the rest of the community like you mentioned.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right.
Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we can't wait to be back talking to you on the so this will be on September 14th, Saturday, oh sorry, September 15th, the Sunday, and then we'll be
Hmm.
back with a episode after the episode 5, after a week after the VMAs tomorrow, and that'll be on the 22nd.
Yeah, thank you everybody again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Have a great night.